Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Scott Lewis, who is the co founder and CEO of Spartan Investment Group. He is responsible for the strategic direction of the company and ensuring that it aligns with their mission to improve lives through real estate. Prior to Spartan, Scott held positions as regional sales manager for a biotech firm, various positions in strategic and project management for federal government, culminating at the GS 15 level, and was on active duty in the U.S. Army as an infantry officer. In addition to Spartan, Scott is active in the U.S. Army Reserves and an Iraqi Freedom Combat Vet. Scott Lewis, first of all, thank you for your service. And welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast.
Thanks for having me, Andrea.
Okay. So, can we start with what is Spartan Investment Group and how do you improve lives through real estate?
So Spartan Investment Group is a real estate private equity shop focusing on self-storage. That's the asset class that we really enjoy. And we raise our own dollars, we find our own deals, and we operate our own, not only facilities, but our projects as well. And then kind of going over to our mission to improve lives through real estate. That's a really interesting question because you can think big picture, big grandeur. I'm going to change the world. I actually don't believe in changing the world. It's not something that I am on a mission on. I like operating within my sphere of influence. Like, who can I, at arm's length, really impact? And that's what our mission is about here at Spartan, to improve lives through real estate. It's nothing grand. It's small things every day. How you interact with your fellow Spartans as a teammate. Can you get that piece of information to them a little bit faster that enables them to get their job done a little sooner? Can we help out one of our investors a little bit more than normal when they're going through the onboarding process and some of the paperwork is foreign to them? Can we go above and beyond and help them? Or storage customers, when they're rushing in and they need a unit because they're going through a trying time life, can be really compassionate there. So really the improving lives mission isn't, it's more about a mindset that when somebody walks away from you from an interaction with Spartan, like, their life is just a little bit better than it was before they came to you.
So, I'm assuming that that kind of comes out in the way that you encourage the team to interact and things like that.
Yeah, so we have a mission, vision, and values like most companies. Ours is really in our DNA. If you talk to anybody about Spartan, they will tell you about the values inside the company. Like, even folks when they walk through our office doors, I could feel your culture. That's been said to us multiple times. But one of the things that we have that not a lot of other companies have is a creed. It's what defines to be a Spartan. It's like, I, how do I act today? Well, read the creed. How do I make this decision? Read the creed. And that's really kind of how do I interact with the world when I have my Spartan hat on? It's read the creed. That will tell you everything that you need to know to be successful as a Spartan.
You founded the company with Ryan Gibson, right? How did things get started and how did you guys choose your roles?
Yeah. So Ryan is our chief investment officer.
Investment.
Um, it's really kind of like looking at skill sets. For me, I'm kind of a big picture guy, strategy, kind of like tying everything together. Culture is a big part of my responsibility. Ryan is a relationship guy. He builds relationships faster than anybody I've ever met in my life, and he loves it. I give an example. There was this real estate guys radio show, Secrets of Successful Syndication event, when we were just learning how to do this. We went to this event to learn how to do syndications correctly and not go to prison. So we go to this event, and it's a good event. And the first day ends or something like that, and there's a happy hour, like your standard conference, right? So we go into the networking event, and both Ryan and I walk in, and he's like, 15 minutes. I'm like, maybe. So I walk in, I talk to two people. I'm like, I'm out. Like, I can't do this networking stuff. Ryan didn't show up till like 3 a.m. So like, I'm a very much of a back office CEO and an operational CEO. Ryan is the president as the president and CIO is very much kind of if you look for our marketing materials and everything, you'll hardly ever see me. So just that's like Ryan does really well on the camera. I think he missed his calling. Like if this Spartan thing doesn't work out, he might have like some opportunities in Hollywood, but he loves under the camera. He's kind of the real face of it. He really enjoys that. He gets energy from networking with folks. Me, I get my energy from building processes and SOPs and the cultural aspect of it. So it was really kind of a divide and conquer and filling in the gaps of our personalities with the other person.
Mm, that's great. So, how did you guys even decide to go into business together?
So, everybody asks, because, especially new entrepreneurs, like, how did you find your partner? And our story sucks because we moved next to each other. So good luck. So
Oh, wow.
Ryan loves to tell the story. He was just at a big conference out in Newport Beach and he was talking about this. And Brian had moved to kind of a new a gentrifying neighborhood in DC in Southeast, which was historically a little bit of a rougher neighborhood, but it started to turn around '07, '08. Ryan got there in '09, and there was a house that was one door down from him. So there was Ryan's house, another house, and then this other house that was for sale. So every time somebody would come by, Ryan would check the mail, pretend to check his mail because he was really interested in who was moving in next door. So my wife and I were looking for a house, came out of that one. Ryan's like rifling around in his mail, even though there was nothing in the mailbox. Struck up a conversation, and that's kind of how we met. And the first deal that we did was the house in between. And Ryan has an entrepreneurial spirit. I really don't. I'm not an entrepreneur. I get it. I started a business, and by definition, yes, I'm an entrepreneur. By like folklore that you read, like with Musk and some of these other guys, Dorsey, that love to start companies. I don't want to start lots of companies. I just hated everybody else I worked with, and I wanted to create a place that didn't suck. So that's why I started a business. It was
Fair
not
enough.
lemonade stand and all this other stuff. Ryan had lemonade stands, all that stuff. So he's really the entrepreneur of the group. So, we'd become friends, and my cousin had this harebrained scheme to import salt from Egypt. And because there was a road salt shortage. And I'm like, this sounds like a bad idea, but hey, what the heck? Went over to Ryan. I'm like, hey man, I need some money. We're gonna buy some salt from Egypt. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, all right, man, if you're that crazy, we're in. So that's kind of how it got started. So our story is that it's not really repeatable to folks, but it is one of those things when you find somebody that really fills the gaps in your personality and you fill the gaps in their personality,
Mm.
there's probably a decent chance that could be a good partnership.
Yeah, that's a fun story. I was just talking to somebody yesterday who was saying so much of it is just like that sort of that luck. There's not like a repeatable process. It's organic and it changes depending on your situation.
Book
Special.
I always recommend when anybody talks about luck, and it's by Annie Duke. She was a professional poker player, and it's called Thinking in Bets. And her hypothesis is every outcome has two components, skill and luck, right? So like every single thing you do has luck involved with it. And like, when you think about Ryan and I meeting, the luck was moving next door to each other. The
Yeah.
skill in that what's so far a positive outcome is really understanding ourselves. Like I suck at networking. Ryan, not a huge fan of SOP and processes, right? That's not right. That's not his necessarily strong point. But when you smash us together individually, Ryan would have lots of friends and no processes. I would have no friends and lots of processes. So you kind of see how a syndication business kind of needs both, right?
Yeah, sure.
So the sum of the parts, when you look at Ryan and I, truly are more than just the whole. And we have a third partner as well, because there's you got to be able to do math in real estate investing. That's important. And Ryan and I were okay at math, but then we found a youngster that's about 10 years younger than us, but just an absolute whiz kid. And he's our CFO, Ben. And so we brought him into to kind of fill that gap so that when you look at that quintessential three circled Venn diagram and you got the three of us, that center part that all circles overlap is Spartan Investment Group.
Hmm. How did your military background, how does that impact maybe how you set things up, but then also how you function now as a leader?
I think it's really like two things that I've really taken away from the military. Obviously, your systems and processes, right? There's a lot of discipline that goes into the rigor and everything that the military does, and that very much carries through here, it's through my personality. But I think the second thing is I am a combat vet, and I didn't have it that bad over there. There was a lot of guys over there that had a hell of a lot worse than me. It's still a fairly stressful situation to be over there where like not the most fantastic stuff is happening around you. I was very lucky I didn't have any of my soldiers killed and I obviously didn't die either. But that kind of like that environment over there really kind of makes you put things in perspective, right? So when I come back here and a lender doesn't do what they need them to do at the closing table. Oh well, what do we need to do? Don't panic, take a knee, face out, like put your plan together and stop panicking. You're not getting shot at, your friends aren't getting blown up and any of that stuff, right? So it just kind of allows you to put stuff in perspective and allows me to probably be calmer when other folks would be panicking.
Yeah. And you also mentioned just the values and how important that is, which I suppose that might be part of your processes. But values in the Army are such a big deal too. So I'm sure that that also somehow carries in.
It very much does. The army has its values, and that's also where our creed comes from too. Is so when you think about that, what it defines to be a soldier, sailor, airman, or marine, there's each force has what's really important to it, and what is important to it through the values, through the various creeds, right? The army has the soldier's creed kind of as your basic creed. And contained within that is the warrior ethos that's part of that, right? So when you think about that, of what it means to be a soldier and the ethos that you live by on a day-to-day basis as a soldier, that helps just everyone align. It also helps the organization be very selective because we put this out there. If one of our values is tenacity, and if you're weak and you're not really tenacious, like coming into Spartan, you got a 1 week time frame. That's it. Or if you read our creed and it doesn't really align with you, then stay away from it. So in addition to guiding current employees, like a very, very clear and well articulated mission, vision, values, and ethos, creed, whatever you want to call it, also helps you recruit because the right people will see that and they'll be like, that's me, I'm in. And one of the things, if one of our key interview questions to kind of go back to why Spartan? If it's some BS about like, the job or I like real estate, goodbye, out. If you don't talk about our mission, vision, and values or our creed, because it's there for you to see, it's generally like game over in your interview. Doesn't matter, could care less what your skill set is.
Mm. I appreciate that. I was going to ask you if you had any specific questions that you ask it in interviews. So that was great. And your values, then I saw them earlier and I wrote them down: growth, respect, integrity, tenacity, transparency. Um, as you've grown, how have you reinforced those values throughout the company? How can, besides the through that initial process, but then how does somebody, yeah, how has that continued, to be reinforced as you've grown?
So it's not special sauce, right? There's ways to do this. And one of the things that we do every single week, we get the entire headquarters together and it's called our sync meeting. And it's basically a cultural realignment meeting every single week. So every week we go through, number one, we have gratefuls because that's one of the things that we do is we want to make sure people really recognize, or are recognized for the work they've done. So everybody, real quick, takes us about 20 minutes to get through about 50 people, just rattling off, hey, Steve, I'm really grateful for you, like firing over that Excel document really fast. That was awesome. And we do that every single week. In addition to that, we give out um, instances of how people adhered to the mission, the vision. We try to do an individual values somewhere on that grit continuum there, or really embodied our creed. So every single week we talk about the values in that sync meeting. In addition to having up on a wall, we often talk about them. Like supervisors and leaders are like, well, how does that decision align with our values? Or, hey, man, you might be getting close to the values on that. And then also your performance management. When you look at, we call them PEPs, performance enhancement plans, that has a values component to it to align performance to the values. And it's really one of those things that like you got to talk about it a lot. And talk is cheap. You got to really do it. So, if you're growing a company and one of your values is, I don't know, transparency, let's take Spartans, right? When you look at our investor reporting, it's going well, let's put it out there. It's not going well, put that out there too. We're all adults. Like, look at the history of all investing. Not everything goes right. In fact, when I'm looking to invest with another syndicator, I ask, tell me about a deal that went bad. And they're like, oh, we never had any deal that went bad. Nope. Like BS. Either one of two things. You're lying to me or you're new. So either one of those two things is the thing, because the best laid plans of mice and men, like best planning, best risk mitigation stuff still isn't going to go right. It could be where you've never lost money. So Spartan has never lost money, but we've had deals that have missed projections. We've had deals that have killed projections. And I actually use one of them as a time that we failed because we didn't predict that. So when you go back to Annie Duke, those results that we achieved, which were banger results, 168% return in 20 months. And that was a failure. And the reason I say that is because when you look at skill and luck, we did a deal. It was with a partner, it was with a mobile home park. And we didn't have that much skilled decision making because that's not what we do. But it was with a partner of ours. We thought it was a good opportunity, but we got lucky. So for me, that's not a fantastic thing to go back and be touting around. So really kind of getting at that talking about that as a transparency thing and putting it out like here on a podcast, some people would cringe. They're like, dude, why is he talking about that? Because it is. And we want our investors to know who we are so that when the time comes, when we get in trouble, they trust that the information that they're receiving is the correct information. That goes back to our integrity value.
Hmm. Yeah. So trust, building trust that with the investor, that's one of the reasons why you share not just tenacity, but transparency, all these different, I would imagine that they feel pretty confident then when it's time to invest, that they're ready and willing to do so.
I think that's one of the things that has really fueled our growth. People really appreciate our transparency, even when it's bad news. They appreciate it when it's good news. They appreciate it when it's bad news because here's the thing with investing. I mean, it it's about understanding what is going on. Like with the stock market, when you invest and it goes down, if the news didn't exist and all of a sudden your Pfizer stock was worth 40% less than it was, you get really mad. But when you look at all of the information environment out there right now and the stock market's down, whatever, I think it's up a little today, but over the last couple of years, it's come down. Okay, that makes sense because I have all this other information. When you're investing in private placements, this is what Spartan does, you, you don't have access to the public markets for that information. So it's on the sponsor's responsibility to provide that information. And you have you have an utmost responsibility to do that for folks because when you're taking money, especially from retail investors, this is money that people have worked a long time for. So you owe it to them to provide information as much as you can in a manner that is not like it's like so burdensome that it just becomes that's all you do, right? So there's the limits are wide, but they're there, but just to calm their fears. That's what we're here for, in addition to making good investment decisions.
Hmm. Okay. And you also, it, I was looking on your website and you have a whole video, a whole thing about your strategy and how you do strategic planning every 3 years. And
Uh,
um,
Doing it right now.
great. Can you tell us a little bit about that process or why it's such an important piece of how you do business?
So I'll start with Peter Drucker. And I love Peter, has some great stuff. I'm going to disagree with him on one thing. He said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? That's a quote that Peter likes.
Yep, I've heard that one plenty.
And I think that's wrong. And here's why. Culture is a strategy.
I
So
agree.
so when you think about that, like you don't get a choice whether you have a culture or not. Like that's not a thing, right? So when you think about that, culture, like that's your baseline strategy. But the reason that I like strategic planning and we do it in a 3-year focus. A lot of especially public companies and smaller companies, they'll do a 1-year strategic plan. I argue that you can't execute strategy in 1 year. The government is very fond of doing 5-year strategic plans. I don't know that that's the right answer either, which is why we've chosen 3. And what that does is if you have a good planning process and you go through a rigorous planning and you get information from all levels of the organization, and it's Hoshin methodology is the Japanese term for it, or catchball methodology, where top level produces some stuff, gives it to the frontline teams. The frontline teams chime in, goes back and forth a couple of different times. You get a really good strategy. Our business coach made a comment to us during one of our last quarterlies that the Spartan strategic plan of any of his clients, he's got 30 of them, any of his clients has survived the most of anybody's plan that he has by
Hmm.
a long shot. And I think that goes back to having a process clearly defined, but also to build a proper plan, you have to create this dichotomy of rigidity with adaptability in there. So that's kind of what we've done. And the reason that we put it on our website is we want our investors to know what our strategy is. And the new one will be coming out here in the next 30, 60 days along that line. And you can choose whether you want to come with us or not. Read the strategy. Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? And if you agree with it, jump on the bus with us. If you don't agree with it, then don't invest with us. Like that, it might not be that a good fit for you.
Hmm. So it's, I mean, your strategy, your values, um, your creed, these are all things that are really, a lot of times people or companies consider these to be internal things, but you are really using them almost as marketing. It's a conversation that you're having. You're sharing that information with your investors, with your customers.
So we do that for a couple of reasons. So one, yes, it is not really marketing, but it's about this is who we are.
Yeah.
We are an incredibly personal business.
Hmm.
Like I will argue that we are more personal than like some docs,
Mm.
right? Because like the people are trusting us with their hard-earned money. And that is an incredibly personal decision because, mostly we're retail investors. These are our friends. These are our families. These are doctors and dentists and pilots and folks that have worked their whole life to earn this money to go out and invest. And that's an incredibly personal thing. And you got to know, me personally, I like to know who I'm investing with. The second thing is I don't subscribe to the whole ideology that values can be internal because if you don't project them externally, that allows you to be two-faced.
Mm.
You can you can project one thing externally and one thing internally. Guess what? You're going to get caught in that void. So it's got to be 100%. There can be no different you. There can be no you in my book to really go far and go fast. Who you are as an individual, personally and professionally, has to be pretty darn aligned.
Yeah.
And our vision statement, part of the reason why we've started Spartan is so to create an environment for people to grow personally and professionally. Can't have one without the other. It's just I don't believe in that in the differentiation of when I leave the office, I'm a different person.
Mm.
Nope, sorry, like that's not a thing. Like you can come in and pretend, but that's just not a thing. Eventually, over time, your real self will come out. Hell, I'd rather see the real self on day one versus day 725 when your real self that is lacks integrity comes out because the going got hard or you did something, right? So
Mm. Yeah, I think of values similarly. Like they are an internal. They're kind of sometimes they're aspirational to a sense in a degree, but there's always something really real about them. And so, if they can come out, I see that as expression. If they can come out in ways that are in alignment internally and externally, it's almost like the voice of the company. Your values come out in that way.
it's 100. I agree with you 100%. And why would you not want to project your values
Yeah.
if you live by them?
Right.
Because if you project them outwards, if you tell people what you're about, very easy to get cross if you do not adhere to them, right? It's one of those things that if you are, I don't know, like some CEO on a podcast and you're talking and you're jack John about some stuff that your team is like, that's a bunch of BS. Guess what? Your leadership credibility is zero, right? Because you're going to have what the army calls as a say do gap. You're out saying stuff here and projecting to the market, which is a bunch of nonsense behind you.
Hmm.
And if what behind you is really impactful and you live by it, why would you not project it out? Values aren't secret. Like there's no secret sauce. Like some foreign company can't come in and steal your values. It's not intellectual property. It's
Or
who
your
you
culture.
or your culture, right? Like why would you not project that out? Good
Hmm.
or bad, own it. Be accountable for it as leaders. Like and project it out there and it'll help you hire, it'll help you find the right investors if that's what you do or customers, right? When you think of Apple, Apple does a great job projecting it out, right? Of what they value. And Apple's not for everybody. I will never use an Apple product. I hate them, but they're a great product and they are a great company. I don't believe in it. That's not what I want to do. So I'm not going to go down to the Apple store and buy this phone and like get home and be like, oh, this thing sucks. Why? Because Apple's already told me who they are. So I can make a decision that I don't want an Apple.
So you said that shared consciousness is part of your previous or your current strategic plan. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and how you have worked to achieve it?
So shared consciousness is always a work in progress because it ties into communication. And the average company under communicates by about a factor of 10. It's kind of general, right? When you're growing, Spartan's growth rate over the last 3 years has been about 1,200% a year. So we're growing very, very, very fast. In order to grow that fast with a level of risk that is tolerable, the entire organization really has to be plugged in. So when you think about creating a shared consciousness, it's about having an underlying current of information that is standardized across the organization. Every team will have siloing to it. It is not possible to get away from that. It's just not a thing. You're going to have these little silos. But what you want is the 55-gallon drum silo, not the grain silo. So that's what you're trying to achieve because you can't get away from siloing. That's just not a thing. Even if you matrix your organization, you're still going to have siloing and it'll just be a matrix silo within that team versus outside, right? It's not a thing. That's just how humans operate. So what we've done is like really trying to use tech. It's not secret sauce, like leveraging Microsoft Teams and creating an infrastructure. Slack is a great way to create a shared consciousness, but also another way to create a shared consciousness are stories. So making sure that the organization understands the story. So I take every one of our team members out at their 30-day mark to explain the genesis of Spark and how and why our mission, vision, values came to be, kind of how it all is. So we can share those stories. And we share the story of that mobile home park that we knocked it out of the park, but yet we're not super comfortable with that because it was mainly to luck, not skill. And I want to make skilled decisions. So that's what I want to focus on. It's about telling the kind of some of the crazy stories of the genesis of a small company. And then that sync meeting about creating a shared consciousness kind of across where everybody just gives a couple of minutes. They talk about different gratefuls. So it's really about communication. And then the last thing I'll say that most people don't think about, especially in today's day and age, is the office. So I'm in our office now and we never went remote.
Okay.
Nope. Do not believe in it. Even during COVID, we left the office open and let people make a choice. You do you if you want to go to the office. 50% of the team came in, 50% of the team didn't. We've always been remote on Mondays and Fridays just because we want to give people 2 days, especially in the Colorado atmosphere where I-70 is a nightmare on Friday. So go up to the mountains on Thursday, work from wherever you're at on Friday, and then enjoy the mountains on Saturday, Sunday. Don't drive home on Sunday. That's also just a giant cluster on the roads. Drive home on Monday, work from home, do whatever. Um, so that's kind of been our whole thing. And we actually put a lot of thought into how we set up our office here, as do a lot of companies, right? Because this office, like right outside where I'm here right now, is our office is basically bifurcated into two wings, but all of the collaboration spaces are in the middle of it. And there's only one door. So this office had a bunch of doors and I had them lock all the doors except for two for fire purposes. But I wanted everybody coming into one door so people couldn't go to their little hole and never come out of it. There's no fridges allowed anywhere else other than in the central place. Why? Because I want everybody coming here to like get food and or water, or fizzy water, or whatever the hell they want. Steve Jobs, when they were building the new really big Apple thing, he wanted one set of bathrooms in the middle. And they're like, hey, Steve, it's a 1 mile walk for a pregnant woman to get over there. What are you going to do with that? So obviously that didn't come to pass, but that was his ideology, is to have everybody being forced into those interactions.
Hmm. That's interesting. It's enjoyable to hear your intentionality. Not just enjoyable, it's informative as well. Okay, so I want to ask you some questions I've been asking some other CEOs like yourself. What has been one of the biggest factors in your company's success?
I think our culture, that's why people come here. When we started, we were a small company and we couldn't pay like top of market. But we've since moved away from that, and we actually pay very, very competitively now. But when people love the culture here, if you ask them, that's what they're going to talk about. And that's the number one thing. Again, as I mentioned, as a CEO, you don't get a choice. You're going to have a culture. So you have one of two options. You can grab that bull by the horns and ride it, or the bull's going to grab you by the horns and do the same thing to you. I recommend the former.
There you go. Okay, what's one oh, we already covered this one, the one question that you ask when hiring. Any other questions you wanna share with us about from the hiring process?
Yeah, here's a good one. Walk me through a trying time in your life and how'd you get through it?
Mm.
You'll see we've had everybody we've had to go get tissues.
Aw.
And one of our values is transparency, right?
Yeah.
If you come in and you get some bullshit about like, oh, I had my first job and I had a hard project and my boss yelled at me. Yeah, no, you're because that's garbage. All of us have gone through the suck. So like, what is it? And like, show me how transparent you're going to actually be.
Hmm, hmm. Okay, what is your number one challenge as a CEO looking into 2023?
For us, it's the debt markets. Um, I think the Fed, hopefully today with the inflation reports showing it a little bit lower than it was kind of previously. Hopefully they stop this, what I view as a collision course. But I think kind of the political slash economic environment kind of being at odds with one another right now, is probably the biggest challenge we'll have, given the fact that we're in real estate, which is heavily dependent on the credit markets.
Mhm. What do you see as, the greatest opportunity for mid-market companies like yours in 2023?
Talent acquisition. So if you've positioned yourself correctly, then all the big companies are starting to downsize. So there's going to be they're looking at ways to eliminate kind of lesser effective staff, but there's going to be some good fish caught up in that
Oh,
net.
yeah.
Oh, right. So there's going to be some folks where they're coming from really big companies with really big payrolls that are suddenly looking for work, and they're like, that's when small companies that can't necessarily like compete with the big ones on the pay and benefits might be able to get some really good talent if they position themselves to grow during a recession. And that's what you should do as a CEO. You should be always planning for the recession because that's the time you should grow.
What advice do you have for other CEOs who are working to double their revenue?
I would say two things. One, get a peer network. Depending on your size, there's YPO, Vistage, and some of those other groups out there. EO, if you're a small company, being the CEO can often be lonely. You never complain down; it's always up or across, right? So really, kind of getting that peer network. Trying to double your growth is scary. It eats cash, so make sure you have hella reserves. And that's kind of what we did. And my guidance to the CFO is never run out of money. And growth eats cash. So just know that it's coming in and it's going to eat more cash than you think. So if you think you need $1 million, you probably need two.
Mm.
So don't try to double your revenue growth without a lot of money in the bank to support yourself because you're also going to make mistakes. So be ready to take some hits. Just make sure they're body blows and not on the chin.
Love it. Um, Building the organizational infrastructure to sustain high growth can be a challenge. This has been, I think it sounds like one of your specialties. What obstacles have you faced in that process? And what do you think that your company has done particularly well?
So the one of the biggest obstacles up front was staffing at the pace that the growth was. So growth almost always, and it like unless you're just going to run and gun on your hiring, which I don't recommend, growth will always outpace your hiring ability when you're small. When you get to the right size and you have a good solid people department, then you can recruit really fast. But here's what's going to happen. It will guaranteed it'll happen. You're going to have this big plan where, all right, we're going to grow, we're going to grow, we're going to grow. And historically, you're going to look back and be like, man, this sucks. Like we've just been in this and we need more people. What will happen is you will build the people department. They will become very efficient and then they will outpace your growth. So you're going to be in this whipsaw of stage one. I don't have any people. Holy crap. A lot of growth coming. Stage two, build out the process to hire really fast and hire well. Stage three, overhire, undergrow. Will happen every time. So you just got to plan for that and know that you're going to you got to make two choices. You either let people go when you overgrow, or you have the operational reserves to have those people in place. So that it's more on the investing activities, part of that cash flow statement to really understand that you might have some people that are kind of sitting around, kind of doing one of these numbers. But that might be okay because if you think the growth is coming, you want to be ready for it because uncontrolled growth without the right team members on can break a business just as fast as not enough growth.
Hmm, fair. Okay, so where can people who might be interested in investing with your group find Spartan and you? And yeah, what information do you want to give? And then I've got one more question for you.
Perfect. Best way to do it, just jump onto the website at spartan-investors.com. There's an investor intake form. You go into our investor management system, and one of our investor relations folks reaches out to you, understands what's really important for you, takes us through what you have, kind of understands you, and then kind of gets you in the ecosystem.
Okay. Great. Well, this has been really fun. I really appreciate not just fun. I think it's interesting to hear, in particular, how a strategist works as a CEO. Because not every CEO is a strategist, as you mentioned at the beginning, and it sounds like you've really gotten a lot of really important things in place to be able to do all that scaling and growth. And congratulations on your growth.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just the company in general and the culture as well. Yeah. And then so my last question for you has to do with this is a Voice of Influence podcast. Um and our view on influence is that it is mutual, that we influence one another. What last piece of advice would you like to give somebody who would like to have a voice of influence?
I would say to the CEO that is trying to hit that 1 million mark, right? Because the 1 million in revenue is this metaphorical brick wall that a lot of companies struggle to get past. Here's what I'd say. Work at it 100 hours a week for 5 years. Make sure you have enough cash in the bank so that you're not worried about it at home. And then just keep driving at it. And if you don't quit, you can't fail if you don't quit. So that's really the kind of the number one thing is just get after that idea and be really passionate about it and make sure you have the support system at home. And that might just be a bunch of cash in the bank before you get started because hungry bellies make bad decisions. And what you don't want to be is worried about the fort when you're trying to, take that next hill. So
Great. Thank you so much for being a voice of influence today for our listeners and other CEOs who are asking some of these questions. Appreciate it.
thank you.